Before I begin these first impressions, everyone should know that this game was played from a key obtained from the developer who had reached out to me for coverage of his game. Keep that in mind for any possible bias as I go into the details of the game. Why Am I Dead at Sea evolved from the Flash game Why Am I Dead, and essentially plays out as a murder mystery set on an ocean cruise. It is a game that is going to do well for those who like narrative experiences and are very patient, and is going to be problems for those who wanted to be walked through an experience point by point. In fact, despite it not being the same playstyle of those games, I find the game reminds me of some of the old point-and-click adventure games from LucasArts. If you like intrigue, you're going to get it here, but it comes with a couple of catches. And I'm going to go into it without major spoilers, which is always hard to do with games like this, especially with mystery genre games. But hell, I like a challenge. The game starts off with you waking up as a ghost, and next to a kid named Paolo. Basically, you're, how do I say this, well, dead. Not exactly the greatest of states to have your protagonist in, but it's what the game throws at you. You have no idea who you are and what has happened to you. The kid, who's basically the kid from The Sixth Sense, tells you that you're dead, and you haven't passed on to the next world yet. Basically, you need to find out what exactly happened to you, and you do that in one major way: possession. You can take over animals and people by possessing them as long as you meet some minimal requirements. The idea behind these requirements has something to do with the strength of spirit. As an animal, for example, they don't have as much spirit as maybe a human does, and a human may have more secrets and more spirit than others. Basically, to possess someone, you need to know a little bit about them, and unlock some secrets about who they are. Now there's 2 levels of possession, and you unlock the second one when you basically unlock some kind of tragic element or deep dark secret for that person. Now not everyone has those levels of possession, however. Here's a hint, look at the Steam achievements. This possession will allow you to interact with the world, talk to other characters in the world, and go places that some others may not be able to go. Each character that you possess also may have unique talents of some sort, like the ability to pick up on people who are hiding something, or being able to see what is in a person's pockets. Using these abilities in conjunction with talking with all the other passengers on the ship, you go around attempting to gather more information about what has been happening on the ship, about who you may have been, and about your fellow passengers. In ghost form, you can also read people's minds, which, to be honest, didn't really help that much. Albeit it was hilarious to look at for all the different characters. Sure, you may learn some things from it, but you normally learn that from everything else you do. Now, with a game of this type, the narrative is very important, and the mystery that plays out here is reasonable. There's reasonable detail to the writing here, and you do want to learn a bit more about these cast of characters. There's also a good variety of these characters here, which helps the game immensely. From a writer who's struggling to seemingly get her first book out quickly for an unknown reason, to a chef who's very organized and doesn't seemingly like things out of place. In addition to that, each character does become a reasonable suspect early on, as more and more dark elements are revealed about them. You will eliminate a couple of possibilities along the way, and there seems to be a person or two that could obviously be behind the mysterious death, but other characters will say 1 or 2 things to pique your attention, and make you wonder if they really are who they say they are, or are hiding something more nefarious. This game didn't force its writing to do that, luckily. It flows naturally in terms of the mystery element, which is a key component in a good mystery. Force a narrative too much, or force too much mystery on a character, and it feels cheap and out of place. That's not the case for this game. Now, I'm purposefully staying away from any more details on the story here due to it being the main draw of this game. The events that occur make you take notice, and the events that happen are reasonable and can feel like they can really truly happen. Okay, yes, I know, possession, mind control, okay, I know, but still. I will say, however, at times, some of the events that occur in terms of opening a character's eyes or revealing a secret of theirs doesn't have the impact that it should in terms of a character's reactions then on forward. What would have really sold this was a change in answers to generic questions in some cases, based on the new mood they're in, but in most cases, it's said with the same personality that they started the game with, which doesn't help the storytelling whatsoever. But overall, the writing is probably the strongest aspect of the game, which is good because the genre calls for it. It gets your attention and keeps your attention, which is exactly what it needed to do. Let's also talk about its aesthetic. The animation and sprite style seems to be really influenced by Earthbound in some ways, at least on the surface, and it does the job throughout the story. Now look, it's not always clear what you can interact with, as some of the interactivity is character-based, which hurts in terms of immersion. But there are little details that really help with the game overall in terms of storytelling. In particular, as you learn more about yourself as a ghost, you start to take on your human form more and more, which really was a good way of playing it out, and I loved the game for that. In fact, some of the tiny details the game has really help sell it, which is a sign of a well thought out and implemented game. As you take control of different characters, they all have music that plays specifically to them, although one character can choose his own music. I do believe I recognize some of the free licensed music here, unless I'm really truly nuts. But what matters here is the appropriate choice of music each character has. Each music seems fitting to the character's personality in question and what they are going through. This was a smart touch that other story-based games with multiple characters can learn from, as it did a great job of setting the mood for each possession. But in those conversations that you have with characters and attempts to move the mystery along, does the game's most critical flaw appear: trial and error gameplay. The game follows a pattern and requires you to unlock certain events and individuals to move along its storyline. Sometimes it's very clear where you go and what to do next, but other times it's most certainly not, which leads you to try every character, every possibility, and going through their dialogue again. This really could have been helped with some text highlighting of some sort, indicating what was already asked and what was already talked about, but that never happened. Now that could be a design choice. This is a mystery after all, but overall I think it hurt the game in terms of its progression. Now there is also a segment where you ask Paulo for what to do next, and he gives you a general hint on it. Not very specific, but mostly general. That does change on later in the game, so keep that in mind. Now usually, when you see an exclamation point portion in a dialogue, that means there's a vital element question that's needed to move on, but sometimes that will require the right character and right unlock in order to do it, and that's not always so clear. Sometimes it's an item in the world that a certain character will need, despite other characters seemingly being able to pick up the item up in question. There's that adventure game logic where only the right character, despite other characters knowing exactly what they know, has to be used. That does make the game suffer a little bit, but does add to the detective nature of things. It's one of those games that you'll have a notepad next to you, and it will be used to only keep track of what you've done if you really don't want to repeat things. There's some information on the net that can help you in terms of a walkthrough at this point, but if you're using it constantly, some of the fun of the experience is taken away in my opinion. However, this leads to a critical flaw when comboed with one other major issue I have with the game. When first playing through the game, I hit a point where I got reasonably stuck. I crossed out everything on a notepad of what to try and what to do, who to talk to, and what to use, to the point where I gave up and looked on the net. And the thing was, well, I was seemingly doing things right in terms of my initial thoughts. However, it seems the game had stumbled into a problem point where I couldn't progress. It had to do specifically with unlocking a door with a cat and the prompt never coming up, with me just walking through the door over and over again. I needed this to be able to unlock the door for somebody to be able to get into the room. After starting over and powering my way through the sections again, it didn't happen again. But that in combination with the above trial and error gameplay led to a lot of frustration, and when getting stuck again later on, I questioned if it was another bug. In fact, the element I'm at right now in the story, I'm getting the same issue. Looking through the game's files, there seems to be some kind of trigger of some sort of description, and I'm wondering if certain triggers set off too early can cause massive problems, which again is a critical flaw in that case. Now note, that's all based on my experience with the game so far, so you need to keep that in mind, as it's not confirmed there's an actual bug there or if there's some extra missing trigger that was missed. Needless to say, it is nerve-wracking, to the point where I walked away a couple of times wondering what I was doing wrong. And hence my comment about patient players at the start of this first impressions. You need patience and an affinity for reading to really enjoy this game. Overall, there's a good narrative experience here, and frankly, I was willing to put up with the discovery problems and even the bugs to learn what happened to the crew. This will frustrate people, but in the end, as the story goes on and on, I've only grown more interested more than anything else, and the frustration is put on the back burner. At $10, you're basically buying a mystery novel of some sorts, and to that extent, I do think it works. But if you do wonder about whether or not you'd like this game and its writing, well, I've got a hint for you. Give its free predecessor a try. I'll include a link in the description below. As I said before, this is basically based off a Flash game. And if you generally like the idea of what is being presented there, then you'll probably also enjoy what's happening here as well. I will say that for any future sequels of the game, that there are some design elements that need to be helped along. But overall, the game does its job in storytelling, and I had fun with it. Just hope you don't run into a game-breaking glitch. Hey, thanks for watching. If you have a chance, leave some feedback and comments below. If you liked the video, hit that like button. And if you want more content like this, hit that subscribe button. This is Dragnix signing off, hoping that gaming brings as much fun to you as it does for me.